Dragons. Is there any other creature in the cosmos that can elicit such a universally visceral response of awe and fear simply from reciting the very word itself? Now, the term dragon has been used to refer to many a creature that could be identified as a large, reptilian, sometimes winged specimen, potentially able to exhale breaths of elemental death. However, there is a very clear distinction between what in actuality are draconic kin and what we all know to be considered true dragons. Now, true dragons are winged reptiles of ancient lineage and fearsome power. They are known and feared for their predatory cunning and greed, with the oldest dragons accounted as some of the most powerful creatures in the entire world. Dragons are also known to be magical creatures whose innate power fuels their dreaded breath weapons and other preternatural abilities.
Many creatures, including wyverns and dragon turtles, share that draconic blood. However, true dragons fall into three categories: chromatic, metallic, and gem dragons.
Indeed. And though their goals and ideals can vary tremendously, all true dragons covet wealth, hoarding mounds of coins and gathering gems, jewels, and magical items alike. Dragons with large hoards are loath to leave them for long, venturing out of their lairs only to patrol or feed.
These true dragons pass through four distinct stages of life, from lowly wormlings to ancient dragons. This lowly wormling, medium in size, no bigger than you or I, is only at an age of a maximum of 5 years. Getting larger, a young dragon, is between the ages of 6 and 100 years old. Getting even larger, to a huge size, an adult dragon, aged over 100 to 800 years. And getting even older, almost prolific, is the gargantuan ancient dragon, of 800 years or more, up to 1,000, 1,200 and beyond.
Indeed. Welcome to the Arcane Archive, once more. Acolytes, apprentices, we are so happy to have you here and join us for today's lesson. If it hasn't already been made abundantly apparent, today's class will be centered on dragons. Specifically, however, the chromatic variant of true dragons. And as always, we are so happy to have you here as we take our deep dive down into the archive. Chromatic dragons. Now, the chromatic dragons fall under 5 separate types. The black, blue, green, and red and white dragons represent the evil side of dragonkind. Aggressive, gluttonous, and vain, chromatic dragons are dark sages and powerful tyrants, feared by all creatures, not least of which include each other. Driven by greed, chromatic dragons lust after treasure, and this greed colors their every scheme and plot. They believe that the world's wealth belongs to them by right, and a chromatic dragon seizes that wealth without regard for the humanoids and other creatures that have, in their eyes, stolen it from them. Now, ironically, chromatic dragons have absolutely no interest in commerce of any kind, really, amassing wealth for no other reason than simply to have it.
These chromatic dragons are united by just one thing, and that is their sense of superiority, believing themselves to be the most powerful and worthy of all mortal creatures. When they interact with other creatures, it is only to further their own interests, believing in their own right to rule, that being the cornerstone of every chromatic dragon's personality and worldview. To these creatures, humanoids are animals, fit to serve as prey or beasts of burden, and wholly unworthy of their respect.
I can definitely attest to that. In our interactions with them, they treated us even worse than kind of our interactions with, like, the High Elves. before, or even the wild elves at one point, depending on which dragon we're talking about.
I mean, I wouldn't compare it to our whole foray into the Dark Elves, but...
I mean, there's a similar vein for sure. Like the cockiness, the haughtiness, not quite as much of the sexiness, although it depends, I suppose, on the dragon. We had quite a number of interesting interactions. Some of them being more ferocious and, like, animalistic or primal, while others being more intelligent, manipulative, and even just downright evil. Honestly, it's quite interesting. The vast assortment of their personalities are, ironically, also rather colored. In a similar, I would say, appropriate manner as the color of their scales.
Yeah. I mean, today we'll go over in order from, I guess, least dangerous to most.
Indeed. Specifically, acolytes. We were able to ascertain in our studies that the chromatic dragons are categorized in certain ways, not just simply by the color of their scales, but also in order of power, interestingly enough. And in descending order from weakest to strongest, you would have the white, the black, the green, the blue, and finally the red as the strongest of all chromatic dragons. And so we felt it would be most appropriate and proficient to take you through all of them in the same order. Starting with, of course, the white dragon.
Beginning with the white dragon.
Quite.
Now, students, we were able to pull some information together from our archive. White dragons, known as the smallest and least intelligent, most animalistic of the chromatic dragons. Dwelling in frigid climates, favoring Arctic or tundra, sometimes even mountains, they are vicious, cruel beasts driven by hunger and greed. A white dragon has feral eyes, a sleek profile, and a spined crest. Now, most dragons at least what we saw, was more of an adult dragon.
Usually, they were the most prolific.
Yes. So, while the younger variety are clad in pure white scales, the one we ran into was a little bit darker, patches of pale blue and light gray, blending into its surroundings much better.
Oh, yes, no. Virtually invisible in the vast blizzard that usually incorporates its surrounding territory.
Now, as we spoke, the least intelligent still means moderately so. White dragons have extraordinary memories, being able to recall every slight, every defeat, and known to conduct malicious vendettas against those who have offended or wronged them. Now, these dragons can speak, although rarely, and really only do so when moved to. These dragons lack the cunning tactics of most other chromatic dragons. However, their bestial nature makes them the best hunters of all dragon kind, singularly focused on surviving and slaughtering their enemies.
Jeez.
A white dragon consumes only food that has been frozen, devouring creatures by its breath weapon while they are still stiff and frigid. It encases other kills in ice or buries them in snow near its lair, finding such a larder as a good indication that a white dragon dwells nearby.
Oh yes, no. So, with all of that knowledge at our fingertips, acolytes, we decided that it would be probably the most prudent and efficient means of drawing the white dragon out into the open by obviously offering us up as bait, you see. So we composed a plan that we would be able to at least get a rational kind of idea, a good estimate of where the white dragon's lair would be, and we would therefore start to kind of position various bits of bait and lures to eventually get him to us, which actually, in actuality, worked very well, as a matter of fact. Very effective.
Now, I had this great idea of subduing the creature, maybe putting it to sleep or trapping it with our magics.
Yes.
Which
I thought it was a great idea.
Yeah, it on paper worked out wonderfully. I overestimated my own abilities.
Well, I mean, I feel like it maybe has been, we underestimated the dragons. Again, when we were led to believe that it was a little less than, intelligent than others, we thought maybe we could use some mind magic to either charm or get it to, relax at the very least. That didn't work out super well.
No.
And so we kind of split up. We got lost in the blizzard a bit.
That's an interesting way of putting it.
I mean, I feel like it's accurately put.
I thought you were going to be right there behind me the whole time.
Oh, I was for like 2 seconds.
Yes. So, it immediately took to me very well.
It did. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was like your perfume, cologne, or whatever, your lotion, but it like loved the smell and maybe taste of you.
Yes.
But I, seeing a golden opportunity in the fact that it had a particular proclivity for Elias Fries, decided to, branch off, head back towards the lair as we had, planned out beforehand, and begin a nice brief inspection there, knowing full well that you would be perfectly fine. I had all the confidence in you. And I must say, Elias, my findings were absolutely phenomenal. It was incredible. Like, it did seem to have a bit of a, despite it being, again, more bestial, still had at least some kind of decorative sense. For you see, upon my entrance into its lair, I was greeted by a most chilling sight. Literally. See what I did there, apprentices? Indeed. You see, it appears that white dragons keep the bodies of some of its greatest enemies as trophies, freezing the corpses where I would assume it can look upon them and maybe gloat, as well as still positioning them as warnings to any others that might intrude upon their lair. I saw corpses of like giants, Remorazes, and even some other dragons that were kind of there, which is impressive, especially for, again, white dragon. I think I saw like a silver dragon or something in there as well at one point. It was interesting. However, I ventured deep inside, bravely, knowing that all the while my friend Elias' life was hanging on in the balance, on the line. And I was able to come across another amazing discovery. You see, it appears that further inside, dragons, white dragons specifically, like to encase their hoard behind a layer of rime and ice, held safe beneath these layers of transparent. I could see all of the treasure there, but protected by a relatively thick layer of ice. Now, obviously, one would assume that the dragon's great strength would allow it to easily just shatter the ice and access its wealth and hoard easily enough without much trouble. While, again, people and creatures of physical description and prowess would have to spend much more time, perhaps even hours, maybe even days, chipping away or attempting to melt the ice in order to even have a chance of reaching the hoard itself. But once again, with the knowledge that you are an incredibly competent spellcaster and would no doubt survive easily enough, I decided I would take a little bit of time trying to melt a little bit of the ice to see if I could procure a bit of a specimen from the hoard to bring back as proof of our amazing venture. Which again, I did succeed. So
yes, well, while my friend here was taking his time getting a trophy for us.
I was going as fast as I could. I didn't want to damage any of the specimens.
I spent quite a long time in the middle of a blizzard attempting to fool an expert hunter into losing my track, which through many uses of Dimension Door and running around and flying around and making myself invisible, I noticed a couple things. One, these dragons are experts at tracking. I don't know exactly how he found me, but over and over again, he succeeded. The other thing I was able to notice while trouncing around in the tundra in a blizzard is that there was nothing else there. I found some bodies, some tracks, but all ended in corpses. This dragon did not want anything near it. It ate, killed, and destroyed everything in its path. It attempted to do the same to me. Now, eventually, I think I got lucky for just a moment, and I was able to elude it, kind of circling around the area we found it in the first place. And I circled back to the cave as we originally planned.
Ah, yes, that's where we bumped into one another.
Yes.
You were very out of breath at that point. I assumed it was just because, you were like I don't know, it's a blizzard, it's cold.
Oh no, I am not the athletic type.
Like your skin was almost like blue, like
Oh, yes,
almost
no.
like white and blue. It
Yep.
was, yeah. No, but on the bright side though, I did show you my little coin that I was able to get, and it seemed to perk you right up. You got some color back into your skin, you know?
No, that's called fear.
Ah, right, no, that is true. At that point, the white dragon did seem to appear almost like by magic out of the blizzard. He was very quiet. I still don't know how he was that quiet. Like, he's so big, but so quiet. Either way, he also did seem to recognize the coin. I think we assumed because of his amazing, memory, he probably has a photographic memory of his entire horde. And suffice it to say, he got a little peeved. A scuffle occurred, and maybe a couple of cave-ins happened inside the lair, and eventually led to like a mountain-wide avalanche.
Yeah.
Of which, though, we were able to survive most easily, I would say as well, because we were able, acolytes, we were able to turn make a makeshift sled out of like the crumbling debris of the lair and ride the avalanche all the way down to the base of the mountain, out of harm's way, triumphant once again, as we always are.
You somehow make these stories seem way less life-threatening than they are.
Thank you.
I don't know how you do it.
It's a talent. And so, apprentices, our next stop on our chromatic voyage is going to be the Black Dragon. Indeed, the Black Dragon is known as the most evil-tempered and vile of all chromatic dragons. You see, black dragons collect the wreckage and treasures of fallen peoples. These dragons loathe seeing the weak prosper and revel in the collapse of humanoid kingdoms. They generally make their homes in fetid swamps and crumbling ruins where kingdoms once stood.
With deep socketed eyes and broad nasal openings, a black dragon's face resembles that of a skull. Curved, segmented horns, bone-colored near the base, and dark, dead black at the tips. As it ages, the flesh around its horns and cheekbones deteriorate, as though eaten by acid, leaving thin layers of hide that enhance its skeletal appearance. A forked tongue, drooling slime whose acidic scent adds to the dragon's reek of rotting vegetables and foul, fetid waters.
Quite. You see, all chromatic dragons are evil, make no mistake about that. Well, maybe not all the time. But still, black dragons stand apart for their sadistic nature. A black dragon lives to watch its prey beg for mercy, and will often offer the illusion of respite or escape before coldly finishing off its enemies. A black dragon strikes at its weakest enemies first, ensuring a quick and brutal victory, which bolsters its ego as it terrifies its remaining foes. And yes, I know this from personal experience, for you see, as always, me and Elias did a very sophisticated means of ascertaining who among the two of us would be the one to, of course, face the dragon directly, with rock, paper, scissors. And your boy threw out scissors when he should have thrown out paper. What can I say? I'm a mage knight. I have a habit. I like sharp things, sharp, pointy stuff.
You do tend to throw out scissors.
I like it. I like the peace sign.
That's nice.
So it's a two-pronged kind of thing.
There's a theme there.
Yeah, there is. Suffice it to say, though, that then meant that your boy was the one that needed to go ahead and face the black dragon. And by knowing, again, beforehand, a bit of its personality and its proclivities, we devised in my opinion, rather ingenious plan of we raised a couple of corpses in the swamp that we found. Very convenient, actually.
Oh, it was.
And then combined that spell with a bit of the spell seeming to allow, to disguise them as normal people. Not normal people, but fellow adventurers, at which point directed them along with me, basically to lure out the black dragon.
Well, we kind of... See, this time, as opposed to luring it out, you kind of went right in.
I mean, yes, no, I mean, I did. We lured it slightly out, I went to, what appeared to be maybe, a nice, centrical, place in the swamp, and I basically just kind of yelled really loudly for a while, augmenting my voice through magic, of course, and eventually the black dragon did respond. Although what happened was it kind of appeared at first and gave like a bit of a very grandiose speech or whatever as it looked down at us, and I gave a equally verbose rebuttal about how we were going to slay it viciously, and then it breathed acid on all of us, which obviously destroyed the corpses quickly. At which point, however, that I knew this was the moment, the role of a lifetime for me. So at which point I fell down to my knees in abject horror, bawling my eyes out, screaming at the top of my lungs at the loss of my beloved adventuring party, all the while the black dragon itself stood above me, laughing maniacally in hatred and anger and vitriol, and I was just there looking up at it, pleading in my eyes, specifically to spare my life. I mean, the entire situation had like switched up very quickly.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, at that point, while I could hear him, I did duck out of that whole area. See, my job this time was to survey the area, as I like to do.
Yes.
Now, we kind of found this dragon in a swampy, fetid area with kind of a small ruined kingdom of years past.
Oh, it was a wonderful place. At one point. Not anymore.
Not
really.
anymore, no.
It was very bad. It was like
And,
just dissolved and flooded. It was stinky too.
Oh, it was terrible. But I used this opportunity while Alastor pleaded for his life.
It was giving on the performance of a lifetime, alright? It was all fake, it was all acting.
It was-
Alright, acolytes? Let me be perfectly clear. It was all an act.
It was quite good. I don't see that very often. But
right.
I kind of saw what this black dragon could influence in the area around it. I saw creatures seemingly crawling out of the fetid water, shambling mounds of decaying nature. It was quite wonderful. Now, we did I snuck around, kind of looked at the whole thing. I found some of its treasure. Which it was all these old crumbling artifacts and just this wondrous history just being decayed all around it.
It was sad to see, a sorry sight.
It really was, and it's this area that was once a wonderful
Bustling
kingdom.
metropolis, at least from what we were able to ascertain.
Oh yes, I mean it was fetid.
Full of life and vigor.
It's littered with bones and fly-ridden carcasses of kills, just all fermenting and melting from the acid of this dragon. Quite a lot of bugs, which I didn't enjoy.
I hated the bugs.
No, flies.
They were so
centipedes.
resilient, they just wouldn't die. I fired a firebolt at a number of them and they somehow just tanked it.
Yeah, it was
Ridiculous.
It was not good. And this was a large source. It was about a mile out that we started encountering this, and as close as we got, it was terrible.
I believe this one was also about adult age or so. It
must
could have even potentially been on the verge of ancient, even.
Yes.
It was quite, intimidating and imposing for sure, but nothing your boys, your professional adventurers extraordinaire couldn't handle, of course.
Yeah, no, quite disgusting. But once I kind of made the lay of the land and got back to our previously agreed upon reconciliation point, I kind of gave you the call, gave you the signal.
Yes, no, you went ahead and you sent me a sending to let me know that you had accomplished your examinations and the like, at which point the act was up. The jig was up, my apprentices. You see, at that point, I did the whole smirk thing as I looked down. I blinked and I said, ho, 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 ho. You have no idea who you're really dealing with, do you, you fetid, decaying, disgusting, overgrown gecko? I looked at him. I said this to his face, you see, which was also very disgusting. He also smelled super bad. I also admit I maybe got a couple of scars from him dripping acid on me while I was pretending to be, frightened and whatnot. Either way, though, you see, I had ended up doing a bit of a combination of using my spell contingency while also using a dimension door. For you see, I had specifically a necklace of fireballs that we had procured beforehand, as I tossed all of them in the air while also casting simultaneously Delayed Blast Fireball while with my contingency while using Dimension Door to teleport out of there 500 feet. Suffice it to say, there was a huge explosion of fire and the like previously as I turned around, but I didn't look at it, of course, because cool guys don't look at explosions, as I walked out of there like a boss, which, interestingly enough, did not kill him immediately, actually. He followed me, at which point I felt it was prudent to meet up with you, as, you know, I wanted to make sure you were alright, of course. But then the dragon did follow me, and the three of us kind of engaged in a bit of Battle of the Titans, as it were. And while we all got a couple of good licks and hits in here and there, but eventually the dragon himself was on the verge of defeat. And if you know anything about black dragons, you should know when they are on the verge of defeat, a black dragon will do anything it can to save itself. However, it will accept death before allowing any other creature to claim mastery over it, which I did kind of beckon him to be like, well, hey, why don't you get on your knees and kowtow to me, you douche? He didn't like that.
We didn't let him go.
Oh, well, he kind of got away because we were also out of spell slots. At that point, we were kind of, it was a bit of a stalemate, a standoff. We kind of just slowly walked away from one another and let it go.
Well, our goal, I mean, to reassure you students, was not to kill these beasts. It's to learn
not specifically, of course, unless, again, absolutely necessary. To be fair, they are evil, but at the same token, you know, we are supposed to be more neutral, you know, observers of these areas to compile information to best be able to then share with all of you so that we can learn and be more conscious and aware of all creatures and things in the multiverse. Combat and battle, while thrilling and invigorating, is also not the main, directive of the Arcane.
No, I prefer the writing aspect. That's
yes,
definitely
no.
it. I think that nicely packages up.
I will say, though we did, kind of mutually decide to separate, I was able to keep an eye on it. He kept track of us for quite a ways for a long time. You see, black dragons however, we were able to specifically get away and break off contact when we moved into another dragon's territory, luckily. For you see, black dragons hate and fear all other dragons. They spy on their draconic rivals from afar, looking for opportunities to slay any weaker dragons and religiously avoiding the stronger ones. I mean, I dare say that if a stronger dragon would threaten it, a black dragon would have zero qualms with abandoning its lair and seeking out new territory entirely, which we did because there happened to be, again, another silver dragon in the area that we kind of alerted to the presence of the black dragon. And, well, we kind of evicted him just as a kind of, final FU moment.
Well, we did severely weaken him, so I think that...
We did! Yeah. But again, he was also being an asshole to me, like doing all that kind of stuff. I felt it was only not right to be just as petty as he would be. But, in essence, that was our personal interactions with the Black Dragon. Well, I do believe now it is time to talk about our time with the Green Dragons. The most cunning and treacherous of all the true dragons, Green Dragons use misdirection and trickery to get the upper hand against their enemies. Nasty-tempered and thoroughly evil, they take special pleasure in subverting and corrupting the good-hearted. In the ancient forests they roam, green dragons demonstrate an aggression that is often less about territory than it is about gaining power and wealth with as little effort as possible.
A green dragon is recognized by its curved jawline and a crest that begins near its eyes. Its legs are longer in relation to its body, enabling it to easily pass over underbrush and forest debris when it walks, essentially built to scour forests. A green dragon stalks its victims as it plans an assault, sometimes shadowing creatures for days. If a target is weak, the dragon enjoys the terror its appearance evokes before it attacks. It never kills all of its foes, preferring to use intimidation to establish control over what survivors are left. It then learns what it can about other creatures and activities near its territory, and about any treasure to be found nearby. Green dragons will occasionally release prisoners if they can be ransomed. Otherwise, a creature must prove its worth to the dragon daily or die.
Indeed. They are a wily and subtle creature. Green dragons bend other creatures to its will by assessing and playing off their deepest desires. They absolutely accept the servitude of creatures lower that they consider to be lower than them, but they especially delight in corrupting and bending elves to their will. A green dragon sometimes racks its minions' minds with fear to the point of insanity, with the fog that spreads throughout its forest reflecting those minions' tortured dreams.
A green dragon's favorite treasures are the sentient creatures it bends to its will, including significant figures such as popular heroes, well-known sages like us, and renowned bards.
Let me tell you, apprentices, there was no doubt in our minds that we were the absolute cream of the crop, the crowning jewel in her hoard, and we'll get into that in a second.
Aside from those beings, it also collects treasures such as emeralds, wood carvings, musical instruments, and sculptures of humanoid subjects.
Quite. A forest controlled by a green dragon is very easy to spot, for you see, as we stated earlier, a perpetual fog hangs in the air in a green dragon's domain, carrying an acrid whiff of the creature's poison breath. Now, you see, apprentices, we have learned much of this, if not all, practically all, of this information, straight from the lips of a green dragon herself. For you see, our plan of action this time around was to essentially spread our word of our abilities, accolades, and the like in the surrounding forest station area for the green dragon interest to be piqued, for her to eventually reveal herself to either barter with or for us to even be captured by her. Of which this did indeed happen.
It went quite well at first.
Seemingly, anyway. In truth, this experience is probably our darkest in regards to all of the chromatic dragons. Suffice it to say, the initial first part of the plan went off without a hitch. We were able to, we spread tales of our accolades, abilities as powerful spellcasters and scholars with all manner of vast knowledge, which is all true, of course. Which she did indeed seek us out. Attempted at first to ambush us. Once more, she seemed to be, it was difficult to tell, but seemed to be of a definitely older nature, similar to the black, maybe either right on the cusp of ancient or right below it, or maybe even ancient for all I know for certain. But either way, she essentially appeared before us. At first, maybe hostilely, but when we proved that we were in fact as competent as we had let her to believe, she instead decided to change tactics and realize that we were after something, and offered to exchange information about herself, her, I guess for lack of a better word, culture, habits, and even her lair in exchange for knowledge and information that we could provide for her. And being that we felt confident enough, we agreed. And so we ended up spending quite amount of time in her lair in the forest. A number of days, if not a week or more. Honestly, the time is kind of blurry to me. I honestly forget the exact amount of time we spent there.
I think it was well over a week, because I was writing things down at the beginning.
Yes.
Keeping a journal, as I always do.
Oh, of course.
But it kind of devolved towards the end, and I can't quite discern where the days ended.
So, suffice to say, apprentices, our agreeing to her terms in this way was a mistake on our part. Very much so. For you see, our time spent there, she did indeed, at the first, hold up her end as we exchanged this information. She told us about a lot of more personal information about green dragons and the like, while we also shared a bit of information about our world, about our experiences, certain information about the surrounding territories and the goings-on that we were aware of. And as we were doing this, though, she did specifically stipulate a very important rule, is that we had to converse with her separately. She, however, offered that she would transform into her human form for all of these conversations, which, yes, she was indeed capable of polymorphing herself into a human form, which, from our understanding, restricted her use of a lot of her more natural draconic abilities within that form. So we felt safe enough at the time that we, if necessary, if something happened, we could instantly run into the room and handle the situation. But suffice it to say, as we were engaging in these separate conversations, she proceeded to attempt to manipulate us subtly, as we have told you the green dragons are ought to do. For me, I'm still not entirely sure exactly what your experience was, but for me, she attempted, it seemed, to prey upon our relationship in the sense that she referred to you as being dead weight to me, that you were a downer or weak and holding me back from potentially reaching my full potential, that I could achieve so much more if I would separate myself from you and continue on my own. Which at first seemed absolutely ludicrous to me, the mere thought. It's like, I'm doing this with my best friend. We are traversing the vast omniverse together, amassing knowledge and experience and information and all of this together. That's part of the fun. And she said, well, he's always seems to be complaining about everything, about how you're always risking your lives, and I mean, isn't that part of the fun? And after a while, I don't know, it was between the nightmares and the lack of being able to rest and to get my thoughts together, her words started to kind of, I'm ashamed to admit, make sense a bit at some point. What about you? What happened to you exactly? I know that you also were being affected and influenced.
It was a very harrowing experience overall. It seemed to be normal at first. I surveyed the area around her lair, got lost a couple times, all normal things that I get up to.
Absolutely.
Eventually, on these kind of scouting missions as I would go, I started to go alone, and she would just appear, kind of in the fog, almost seemed to be waiting for me, and we'd kind of exchange information and talk about, kind of how all this works. And at first, she seemed very interested in what I had to say. It started like, oh, well, why don't you do this alone? Why don't you know all these things, like, Alastor just uses you for your books and your writing, and why do you keep letting him put you in these bad situations? And, you could just do this all on your own. And she pointed kind of anger in your direction for me, which, as you know, as annoyed as I get, I try not to get angry at things. And
yes.
No, I think she really did a good job of that.
I mean, she's a master at her craft, no doubt. Everything she told us about green dragons, honestly, it should have clued us in, really. But
it's a little ironic.
I feel it was a mix of, she was literally and figuratively poisoning us that entire time. That is why us choosing to stay in her domain was a oversight on our part. I mean, admittedly, it felt like it was the only way we could possibly get any true in-depth information, especially from the source itself.
Yeah. I mean, it was an amazing opportunity.
Like, it was the first time that a dragon was actually willing to, at least any of the Chromatics were willing to actually engage with us.
Oh, yes.
Personally, and actually just talk. And I confess, it was an opportunity that I was hard to to pass.
I mean, it was intoxicating.
It was, literally. Emphasis on the toxic.
Let's just say it didn't go well for either of us as far as
No, we began to become very short and cross with one another, getting very agitated and angry at the smallest things, until one day, we kind of just blew up at each other in rage and anger about things that were completely inconsequential and that were ridiculous. And at that moment, after we finally just kind of let loose, we looked at each other and we kind of just started laughing, realizing what had just happened. That we had been this entire time being manipulated. And though we did say that first and foremost, our intentions and directives as a part of the Arcane Archive are never to engage in aggression or war or any kind of destructive vices. I think we both knew at that point that this was an individual, this was an entity that we did need to do our best to destroy. And
I mean, we tried.
We did. We engaged her. And it was a bloody, brutal fight. I'm still not entirely sure exactly how it ended. Like, at the end, I thought we defeated her, but I don't know. It's hard to say. She was able to cast magic herself. Mm-hmm. And that is something that is very rare from our experience. Like, only green dragons, at least, not only, but they are the most adept at casting magic. They are the most inclined to learn how to cast magic. All dragons are inherently magical, but greens are some of the most masterful at it. And it's hard to say, honestly, at that point, what could even be considered to be real or fake.
She was especially good at illusions and kind of clouding on our minds.
At one point, I do not doubt that she is still out there somewhere.
Yeah.
Even though it seemed that we were able to defeat her, we ended up at one point just burning her entire lair to the ground. We set fire to the surrounding forest and environment, though it pained us to do so. But
we never found
her.
So we did get out alive, but I mean, a new perspective.
It did. Her cackling sometimes still rings in my head, even to this day.
But students, if you learn nothing else from today, when you read something in a book and it says that something is good at manipulating others, no matter how confident you are in your own mind, just remember that, keep it at the forefront.
We discussed in also a previous class and lesson about elves and their propensity for arrogance. And, well, this is indeed probably why green dragons seem to have a particular proclivity for bending and breaking the wills of elves. So, please, once again, take this lesson from us. Never believe that you are above anything or anyone, especially a powerful ancient creature's abilities. Always be aware and conscious of your own limitations and your own ability to exceed those limitations, but do not ever make the mistake of thinking that you are infallible or incapable of anything, because anything is possible. But with that, that in its entirety was our time with the green dragons. Let us move on to the next one in our list. The Blue Dragon. Vain and territorial, blue dragons soar through the skies over deserts, preying on caravans and plundering herds and settlements in the verdant lands beyond the desert's reach. These dragons can also be found in dry steppes, searing badlands, and rocky coasts. They get around quite a bit. They guard their territories against all potential competitors, especially brass dragons.
A blue dragon is recognized by its dramatic, frilled ears and the massive ridged horn atop its blunt head. A blue dragon's scales vary in color from an iridescent azure to a deep indigo, polished to a glossy finish by the desert sands. Its hide hums and crackles with static electricity, giving off an odor of ozone and dusty air. Though they sometimes eat cacti and other desert plants to satiate their great hunger, blue dragons are carnivores. They prefer to dine on herd animals, cooking those creatures with their lightning breath before gorging themselves. Their dining habitats make blue dragons an enormous threat to desert caravans and nomadic tribes, which become convenient collections of food and treasure to a dragon's eye. When it hunts, a blue dragon will bury itself in the desert sand so that only the horn on its nose pokes above the surface, appearing to be an outcropping of stone. When prey draws near, the dragon rises up, sand pouring from its wings like an avalanche as it attacks.
Quite. And so, apprentices, with that bit of knowledge in hand, we decided our best course of action for being able to locate and engage this blue dragon would be to book passage with a merchant caravan. Excuse me. So, that being the case, we found a particular merchant caravan that was heading through an area that, in the area, was infamous for blue dragon activity. One thing also to be aware of, though, apprentices, is blue dragons, similar to green dragons, covet valuable and talented creatures whose service reinforces their sense of superiority. However, unlike the more sadistic evil green dragons, if a blue dragon happens to have any bards, sages, artists, wizards, or assassins, they can indeed become valuable agents for a blue dragon, which the dragon itself will reward handsomely for loyal services rendered. So this is something to keep in mind and understand about the difference between a blue and a green. Greens are inherently manipulative. They like to break and mess with and destroy. Blues, on the other hand, do seem to have a certain sense of honor, or even the fact that they care more about their pride than truly being able to, and having maybe other creatures express their superiority, rather than having them simply break and shatter and cower in fear all the time. A blue dragon will especially not stand for any remark or insinuation that it is weak or inferior to anything, taking great pleasure in lording its power over humanoids and other lesser creatures. A blue dragon is a patient and methodical combatant at that. When fighting on its own terms, it turns combat into an extended affair of hours or even days, attacking from a distance with volleys of lightning, then flying well out of harm's reach as it waits to attack again. And this was very much our experience.
That is what we dealt with.
So, essentially, a couple of days into our travels with the merchant caravan, we essentially had once more bargained with them that we would act as protectors against both the blue dragon as well as the bandits group that seems to have been subservient to it. They had colloquially termed these bandits as the Cerulean Slayers, and they were clearly working for the blue dragon, as they all seem to have been branded or in some way adorned with the mark of a blue dragon on them. And exactly as expected, a couple of days into our travels, we were indeed set upon by a group, nay, maybe even a horde of bandits, individuals adorned with said blue dragon regalia. And while the merchants' forces were able to fend them off and deal decent blows, our goal was to ambush and hopefully ward off the dragon from destroying and pilfering the merchants' caravans and wagons.
Now, while we touched on this before, what ended up happening was we waited, and we were successful in that aspect, as eventually it did show itself.
It did.
But as we kind of attempted to exchange fire with it and avoid its lightning breath, it was quite tactical.
Oh, it was masterfully done.
I mean, sitting just out of our reach while still in its, and every time it would dive into the sand and just burrow and appear right where we were and attempt to kind of cut us off
It was almost
from the
like
rest
it
of
was
the
a
caravan.
beautiful dance of death. Flybys, lightning breath, burrow, explode out, just...
It went on for quite a while.
It did. It was not afraid for an extended fight, for sure.
Well, we did succeed in kind of... We hit back. We did...
Eventually, we were able to whittle down his defenses to a point where he seemed to be a bit haggard himself. He eventually kind of tapered off and began to flee. At which point, we, in response, told the caravan to run as fast as they could and we would catch up with them as we decided to give chase. And with a combination of both our remaining spells as well as magical items and equipment, we were able to at least keep him within sight until he ended up literally dive-bombing into what appeared to be a whirlpool of quicksand as he just disappeared beneath. And, well, walking up to it, we were not nearly as confident in our skills of diving into sand.
But we really had no choice.
We had no other choice, and we were not going to just simply let him escape us at this juncture. We put in far too much investment at this point. And so, with a quick look to one another, a fist bump, we dove head on in. Or I dove headlong in, you were smarter and dove feet first. And which ended up diving, literally depositing us into a network of caves and tunnels and burrows.
Yes, because as we kind of knew before going in, usually these layers are secret, hard to find in barren places.
Indeed.
They kind of make these tunnels using both their burrowing ability of their claws as well as their lightning breath to almost crystallize the sand and give it structure.
Yes.
But many deep tunnels beneath this desert.
And at that point, we were unfortunately forced to engage in a very deadly game of cat and mouse with the dragon, as systematically he is no doubt, if not completely familiar, far more so than us, in the layout of these tunnels. And there was tons of moments of just like him popping out, slashing, or blasting us with lightning as we would return fire, hold spells to peck him as he came forth, until eventually I ended up falling through another sand trap pit down into randomly what appeared to be his actual hoard. And let me tell you, apprentices, though it appears blue dragons, all dragons really, do collect almost anything that looks valuable, blues are clearly especially fond of gems. Sapphires, to be specific. I can only assume that blue dragons themselves might consider the color blue to be the most noble and beautiful of all the colors, which is why they covet said sapphires, favoring either jewelry and magic items adorned with those gems, as they were just permeating all throughout this hoard. I didn't get a good chance to kind of pick or take any kind of souvenir, unfortunately, because that was the moment when the blue dragon decided he had had enough of us, and decided to collapse the entire system of tunnels and burrows and caves, effectively trying to crush and suffocate us under who knows how many pounds of sand and rock.
Yeah, luckily we did prepare.
Yes, no, we did.
Was it gaseous form that we used to get out of that?
No. We used rope trick. And
yes.
went into the pocket dimension, at which point we plane shifted back out.
Yes,
to
that
the
was
material
quite
plane.
smart with both.
It was. No, it was quick thinking.
We barely escaped though. We would have suffocated. to death.
We would have suffocated to death. We
But
would have died.
Definitely less harrowing than some of our other dragon encounters.
Well, you know that it was less emotionally or mentally.
Yeah, it was kind of nice to have something more straightforward.
It was, and honestly, ironically, like despite a lot of his annoying, almost troll-like, behavior, where he was just kind of, guerrilla tactics, attacking us, running away, he ironically was still, in essence, in my opinion, far more honorable than almost any other chromatic dragon we have ever had to face.
It was very smart.
He was a genius, tactic, at least in terms of tactics and maneuverability. I mean, he lured us back seemingly to his lair, and then didn't mind at all just collapsing the entire place on top of us when he found it to be far more efficient and effective than his guerrilla tactics were proving to be.
And we didn't see him. I mean, he burrowed his
No,
way
he left at that point. He just dipped out, and at which point we decided we might as well do the same. And you know, I've come to realize a lot of these dragon fights we have left alive, in which point might be like, you know, and also maybe have a recurring theme of collapsing a lot of stuff in the ensuing fight. We're probably gonna have a lot of like long-lived evil creatures that have a vendetta against us. Now I'm just realizing.
I thought you already had those.
I mean, sure, we do, but
No.
now we got even more now.
You.
Well,
This whole having vendettas against me, that's a new problem I'm coming to.
well, I mean, we can debate all day and night about what can be considered a truly a vendetta, and it might just be, you know, professional rivalry, of course,
Sure.
but, you know, either way,
I think that concludes our experience with
yes,
new
no,
dragons.
this encounter for sure pales in comparison to the absolute ferocity and devastation of our final subject, the Red Dragon. Now, these dragons are the most covetous of all the true dragons. Red dragons tirelessly seek to increase their treasure hoards. They are exceptionally vain, even for dragons, and their conceit is reflected in their proud bearing and their disdain for other creatures.
The odor of sulfur and pumice surrounds a red dragon, whose swept-back horns and spinal frill define its silhouette. Its beaked snout vents smoke at all times, and its eyes dance with flame when it's angry. Its wings are the longest of any chromatic dragon, and have a blue-black tint along the trailing edge that resembles metal, burned blue by fire. And from our first-hand experience, the oldest ancient red dragons have eyes that resemble orbs of molten lava.
Indeed. Red dragons are fiercely territorial and isolationist. However, they do still yearn to know about events in the wider world, and they make use of lesser creatures as informants, messengers, and spies. They are most interested in news about other red dragons, with which they compete constantly for status. For you see, no other dragon comes anywhere close to the arrogance of the red dragon. These creatures see themselves as kings and emperors, and view the rest of dragonkind, yes, even other reds, as inferior. Believing that they are the chosen by Tiamat to rule in her name, red dragons consider the world and every creature in it as theirs to command. Now, they are also equally as infamously known to fly into destructive rages and act on impulse alone when angered. In fact, they are so ferocious and vengeful that they are often regarded as the archetypical evil dragon by many cultures. If you hear about the horrendous acts of a dragon, it is usually in reference to a red dragon.
Now, these red dragons prefer mountainous terrains, badlands, and any other locale where they can perch high and survey their domain. Their preference for mountains brings them into conflict with the hill-dwelling copper dragons from time to time. Red dragons lair in high mountains or hills, dwelling in caverns under a snow-capped peak, or within the deep halls of abandoned mines and dwarven strongholds. Caves with volcanic or geothermal activity are the most highly prized red dragon lairs, creating hazards that hinder intruders and letting searing heat and volcanic gases wash over a dragon as it sleeps. Now we, when starting this adventure specifically for the red dragon, thought, what better place than a dormant volcano?
Oh, yes. I mean, let us just preface this by saying red dragons are in no way, shape, or form subtle or afraid or like less. Like they are verbose, flamboyant, and obtuse to the utmost degree. They have no fear of anyone finding them, therefore they don't care if people know where they are. In fact, they are more than willing and happy, in fact, to project their presence in any environment.
So once you know where their territory is, they're happy that you know.
Oh yes, no, it is easy enough to find the place where they might be shacking up, and maybe not as easy to infiltrate, depending. we actually did indeed end up meeting with a couple of other adventurers, actually, who...
Treasure hunters of a sort.
Treasure hunters slash also like mercenaries, I guess. They had essentially been told of this red dragon's presence and had ventured to slay it, to earn themselves a name as well as claim their, much earned prize should they succeed in their endeavor. However, with their help, support with one another and each other, all of us, we were able to successfully locate and infiltrate the horde of the Red Dragon inside the dormant volcano. And it was, my apprentices, let me tell you, it was like a sea of gold. It was...
I don't think we've ever seen something
It
just
was
so...
vast, almost never ending, it seemed, like... disappearing off into the darkness, like just, oh my gosh. And not only that, it is highly evident red dragons value wealth above all else, and their treasure hoards are legendary. They covet anything of monetary value and can often judge the worth of a single bauble within a copper piece at a glance. I also found that red dragons seem to have a particularly special affection for treasures claimed from powerful enemies that it has slain. They like to exhibit that treasure to prove their superiority, because there were a ton of different, staves, swords, daggers, other wondrous items just displayed on these, prominent outcroppings inside the lair, very clearly, deliberately placed and decorated and positioned. It was actually very well done, I must admit.
Yes, well, something we unfortunately learned while we kind of waltzed about that decadent horde. Some of us taking items, some of us finding things that... Ooh,
it was a good sword. I was in need of a new sword.
I know.
It was a beautiful sword.
It's hard to pass up, but unfortunately we learned, quickly after, that red dragons know the value and provenance of every single item in their horde, along with each item's exact location.
Yes.
It might notice the absence of a single coin, igniting its rage as it tracks and slays the thief without mercy. Now, we experienced this firsthand.
Yes.
As soon as us two and the group that we were with started, taking an item here or there. That
we were just taking some souvenirs for our trip,
things that
The Red Dragon was nowhere to be found. We were like, well, this was all kind of a waste of time, but the treasure was there, and we were like, you know what? Maybe the Red Dragon died, so hey, there you go.
And as we continued to take items, eventually the, what was it?
Well, it kind of, reacted. Essentially, the mountain / volcano itself seemed to shake and rumble almost in protest to us removing certain items from the horde. Eventually, for the far end of the cavern to literally explode inward in a array of lava, or I guess in this case, molten magma, as our big red friend finally showed his face, roaring with utter hatred and disdain for all of us, as, well, we took the initiative and we got the hell out of there.
Yes.
As fast as we could. It was an epic battle, apprentices, all the while dodging through the caverns and systems that we had found and traversed previously, as magma began to literally pour and rain through every open orifice of the mountain as the dragon roared, smashing and crashing. Eventually, though, we were cornered and had to engage. And
but we did. We got out of the mountain itself.
We did, and we were able to get out. It did, of course. It literally erupted the mountain as lava. Now lava began to pour down the sides as the dragon came swooping down, cutting off our retreat, and essentially trapping us between it and the slowly encroaching flow of lava behind us.
Now, we had a fair-sized group with us.
Oh, yes. There was around 5 of us at that point.
It wasn't completely, dead to rights. Of course, Alastor, being the brave warrior that he is, he took center stage.
I couldn't let it hurt my friends like that, It was the only natural thing to do.
Well, myself and our new acquaintances kind of peppered that dragon from afar, you went right into its face.
I mean, to be fair, I was the only one, ironically, that had, like, fire resistance at that point.
True, yes.
Which was, in our part, like, in hindsight, very poorly planned, actually. Inside of a volcano, you probably should prep for more, high heat kind of
we made do with what we had. Between me and yours magical talents.
Hey, and the rest, we had a lovely ranger who was a dead-eye shot, for sure, like literally pecking him with arrows, at one point being able to gouge out one of his eyes, which was super helpful. We had another individual, lovely young woman who was capable of bolstering us with a lot of her voice and her musical capacity and abilities as a bard. And we also had an amazing barbarian individual who she just kind of ripped into the dragon, just tearing it apart with her axe. Luckily, as the battle waged on, as epic and awesome as it was, again, we were on a bit of a clock, as the lava slowly encroached and gave us little and little land to step on safely. So finally, bolstered myself up. I just so happened to have, ironically, though we didn't bring any fire protection much, I did have a sword of dragon slaying this entire time that I had. So we took it to him with one final strike as everyone else was kind of feeling down. Flew up, stabbed him straight between the eyes, and then he ate me. And then I stabbed him from inside, which was actually the thing that killed him.
It was quite terrifying, that single moment. Everything went silent.
I went to go and stab him between the eyes, but he ate me instead. Yeah. And then I kind of just, as I fell down his gullet, I stabbed him from inside and was slowly going down. Which, getting covered in molten wet red dragon blood also still hurt.
Yeah.
It was not great. But hey, he died! We successfully slayed the red dragon! And the lava was still coming. So
there was nothing we could really do about that.
No. It was just a freak accident of nature, literally.
Sure. Yes. Well, we killed the beast.
We got to keep the cool stuff that we got.
Yep, we did. But
surrounding environment was highly devastated, though.
Yeah, there's nothing we can really do about that.
No. We tried to find a druid. There was no druid present to really start helping, maybe to naturally, there was no water around to really control.
To be fair, that is what they're known for.
Yeah.
It's kind of destroying everything around.
No, and to be fair, the surrounding environment was already kind of molten and burnt to a crisp with the fact that he had kind of taken up, shop here for as long as he did. So honestly, yeah, we actually didn't do much ourselves. It was already kind of screwed.
For once.
Indeed.
But we made it back.
Indeed, that, in essence, is the entirety of our venture into the examinations, the analysis, and the research of the Chromatic Dragons apprentices. Boy, what a ride. You could say it was quite the rainbow roller coaster.
What is a roller coaster?
I'm not entirely sure.
Oh, okay.
I'd heard about it like a mechanical contraption one time, I think a collection of gnomes and dwarves had kind of
it's not
created it. Yeah.
Well, we could touch on
it sounded fascinating in terms of its preliminary structure. Either way, as always, apprentices, thank you so much for coming and attending. We will be continuing our talk on the tales of true dragons, I believe, with our next topic being of the metallic variety sometime soon. So please stay tuned and rejoin us back here in class.
It's much more
our next
friendly, high-spirited.
In a lot of ways, yes. There are. It has its own brand of shenanigans and troubles and trials and tribulations, but overall, I'm sure you will find it just as entertaining. And once again, please do remember to join us here in our deep dive here in the Arcane Archive. Class dismissed. Have a great rest of your week.
If only they knew how long it took to get all that information.
Yeah, it's fine. Honestly, I was still thinking we should go back to the Underdark. I really need to go and see the Drow again. We need to do that sometime.
I think you need to find more companions. I don't want to go back there at all.
But it was just so educational.